Hey, Future Wheel here. If you're looking for a more mechanical demonstration, feel free to skip to this time code. I felt it felt appropriate to just kind of keep what I had originally done, just from a demonstrations perspective. But new Blender users might find it a bit confusing. So, okay, that's all. Hi everyone, my name is Will, and today I'm just going to be giving a quick demonstration on how I personally take something that's very rough from like a sketch that can be done basically anywhere, whether it's Photoshop or Procreate, and then take that into Blender so that it can be used to give a quick mock-out of a model so that we can then talk to, say, a director, or choreographer, or actors, or even a shop to just kind of get basic dimensions for what it is that we're working with. So right off the bat, we have just a quick sketch that I did in Procreate. You can really use whatever you like. Honestly, you could probably just do this with a pencil and paper, but the main reason I like to do it like this is because A, it gives us something to work with, and then B is we want to make sure that we're designing in whatever medium we're most comfortable with. And so for me, that just so happens to be sketching. So I just do something really easy, really quick. It looks like a first grader drew it, but it's enough for me to communicate an idea, and I think you'll see that it is as well. So once we have all that squared away, it's time to hop over to Blender. I'm going to skip over the export process just because for some people that might be scanning it, that might just be saving it as a JPEG or a PNG, whatever have you. Just so long as it's somewhere that we can then access it on the computer, and so that it's some form of image that we can import into Blender. And just to keep this in the back of your mind, that sketch was played back at a faster speed just for convenience sake of the video, but it does show the entire process of it. And all in all, it probably took me only about 10 minutes, if it took me that long. Because again, it's a sketch, it's not the final piece. So once we have everything that we were hoping to achieve from our sketching phase, we can hop on over to Blender. So first thing I'm doing here is I'm just setting my unit scale, which can be done in one of the side editors. I know it says scene, and then under there you can see units, and I have it set to imperial. That's just because my brain tends to work with those dimensions in mind. And from there, I'm rescaling my box so that I get a 20 foot by 20 foot, essentially black box. This is just kind of a rough out model, so there's really no dimensions in mind, but again, we need to work with some sort of scale so that we know how big things are going to be. And I mean, a 20 foot by 20 foot space is fairly typical, but what's really more important is scale version of a person, which is just about 6 feet. I don't put it in until a little bit later, but it's just a good idea to have a good sense of how big a person is going to be when you're looking at this type of thing. Because, I mean, looking at a photo on a phone is very different from standing in front of something in person. So once I've got just a kind of quick model box kind of put out there, I'll change its color to, say, something black, and I'll throw in some very rudimentary lighting. And I think another important thing to mention here is that one of the default rendering engines for Blender is Cycles, but I like to work when I'm doing this type of stuff in Eevee, which is EEVEE, which is I've been told it's like a game rendering engine, and it uses a lot of really quick tricks to kind of speed up rendering and also make it so that it's a lot lighter of a workload on your computer. And again, when the goal is really more so speed versus the quality of the final image, because again, we're just trying to get something out there and maintain that creative freedom that comes with working in a very fluid manner. Now, what you just saw was actually nothing very spectacular. All I did to get our image that we had sketched into Blender was I just had it open in another window, and I quite literally just drag and dropped it in. What that then does with Blender on Blender's end is that it will take it and insert it as an empty, which isn't something we can work with. So to get it in a format that allows us to work with it, we have to first make sure that our image is selected, and then at the top of the screen, we'll see a little tab for object, and then inside of that drop down, there'll be a line for convert. And from there, there'll be a couple of options, but we want, I think, one of the second from the bottom one, which is a convert to mesh plane option. And from there, we can then edit this new plane that now has our image set as its texture. And we can, I believe, tab over into edit mode, and from there we can then just kind of take our knife, which is I believe the K hotkey, and then kind of cut out all of the elements that we need. And I just kind of going through this process here. You see I just pulled out this kind of lower ground row, kind of brick wall looking thing. And I know it's moving fairly quickly, but the only other thing that you're seeing here is me assigning the origin of an object so that it behaves a little bit more how I would expect it to later on, so that it moves or it rotates or it scales correctly. And all I'm doing for that is I'm just selecting somewhere that makes sense for the object to kind of sit on the ground. In this case, it's an edge, and I'm hitting Shift S, and I'm moving my 3D cursor to that edge. And then I'm tabbing out of the object's edit mode, and I'm going back up to the object tab when I'm in object mode. And in there, you'll see set origin, and then in one of the options is set the origin to 3D cursor. And again, all of this is just so that our elements kind of behave how I would expect them to if I was to scale it inside of the environment you're seeing right now. But before I do any of that, I'm just going back through the outliner, and I'm just naming things in just some way that makes sort of logical sense. For anyone else who may have the misfortune of coming through this file, they can at least have a naming convention and we can be on the same page. Here I'm also just assigning different collections for things. Like I'm putting all of my lights in one collection. I'm putting my camera in there as well. Any scenic elements, they can have their own collection just to help stay organized. And there you can also see why it's important to set the object's origin so that the scale behaves appropriately. Here I am just kind of organizing things on stage, just moving them around. Because again, I didn't set out for any sort of specific goal. This was just to throw elements in a box and just kind of get a general size of what things are going to look like. And there you can see that block in the center is just about 6 feet, which again is just for a figure so that we have some sort of reference for where things are and how big they're going to be towards actors or anyone else who's going to be on stage. From there, I'm just throwing in any other scenic stuff that I think I might need. So I'm just going to put in some masking. I'm going to give it a depth just because that tends to be how things work. They're not just infinitely flat objects. So to do that, I'm just kind of assigning a couple of different modifiers I use. I know I've got the solidify modifier on, and I go back in and I assign an array modifier. I like to go with a constant variable rather than the relative option, just for my own sake. This is personal preference, truly. And then from there, I think I just move on to different lighting positions for just kind of how things might look in the actual space. Something to keep in mind when I think doing lighting is rather than doing a copy of an object is to create an instance of it, which is an Alt D rather than a Control D. This way, anytime you modify one of the lights, you're then changing the rest of them that also have that object information. Here I'm just adding a queue because I thought a ramp might look nice. Just a personal preference. It wasn't really anything too strategic with it. I just kind of threw it in just to see how it would look. Because again, this is just a rough out. We're not trying to make anything spectacular here. We're really just trying to get to a point where we can then later on give dimensions for how big something is going to be. Is there going to be any crossover space for any of the actors? Where do things need to be physically in space? And I've always found that Blender's really good for that. I know it's a free piece of software that a lot of people can gain access to them and get a lot of very useful information from them. So I'll just let the remainder of this recording play out at I think a quicker speed, just because I think it kind of falls out of the scope of this video, and I definitely went outside of the scope of what I was set out to do originally, but I think it's also good to just kind of see the finished process and just to know that it's very easy to go from having basically nothing to at least something that you can show people and get kind of basic rudimentary dimensions on fairly quickly and fairly easily. I think all in all, this process probably took me about half an hour from start to finish, including the very quick sketch that we had done the very beginning. But yeah, that's about it. Aside from using something like SketchUp to do this, which is a paid piece of software, I think Blender is great for this type of quick little just thing that you can turn into a rendering and then get some feedback on. Because again, at the end of the day, it's not about producing a final product. It's just about producing a very quick kind of concept, something that we can again just show people and get dimensions off of. It's not this overly complicated thing where you need to create a gorgeous looking model. It's just something to get dimensions from somewhere. All right, I guess that'll kind of do it for me. Thank you for watching if you made it all the way to the end. I don't normally make a lot of videos like this, so I apologize if it was a bit rough, but I hope you got something out of it. Peace. Bye. So we're just gonna start with a new version of Blender, just starting it from point 1. We have first version, I'm in version 4.5. Just gonna go into the regular cube here. Gonna hit Shift A, come down to Image, and we can do Mesh to Plane. And you just want to navigate to wherever the image is stored. In this case, it's on my desktop. I set it on my iPhone. Then we just import it, scale it up so we can see it. Go to Material Preview. I'm going to rotate it an RY or X along the X-axis. Then to isolate it, I'm going to hit the slash key. I'm going to hit Tab, come over to Edit Mode, change my view so that I'm just kind of dead on. In fact, I'm going to swap over to the modeling viewport. Let's do what we did there again. So just kind of isolating the object. And zoom in on it, and then to pull out our knife key, you press K, and from there we just kind of cut it out. You can spend as much time on this or as little time as this as you want. It's really up to you. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I'm just kind of doing this live. Here we are, cutting this out real quick. And then when we've got a good shape that we think we're happy with, you can hit 3 to swap over to face selection, or alternatively, you can do this at the top of the 3D editor. We have this general one here. We're in 3D viewport, and we are in edit mode. And then we have vertex, edge, and face selection. If you hit 1, 2, or 3, you can scroll between them. We're in 3. So make sure that we've got everything that we need. I'm going to pull this in as well, just because I like that little detail. And then to get rid of this edge here, we don't really need to, but I'm going to do it anyway. We'll hit delete. We can dissolve edge. Hit delete. So we'll take that edge, we'll just leave it. I'll come back in with the knife, and I'm going to just get rid of some of this stuff. There. Take 3. And come out, and I'll hit Shift D to duplicate it, and I'll move it along the X-axis, just to pull it away from it. And I'll hit P, and then it'll bring up the separation menu, and I'll just do what I have selected. And we have to hit Tab, because we're leaving this plane alone, and we're going back into object mode. We're going to select our new object, tab back into edit mode. I just want to set the origin, so I'll pick a point that would make sense for it to be on the bottom. And I'll hit Shift S, and I'll move my cursor to that edge. I'll tab back into object mode. And up here, you'll see that we now have this object option for set origin and set origin to 3D cursor. That's this red and white. I'll do that at the bottom of the screen. So we'll make it that. This way, whenever I do any of my scaling, it's from there. If I rotate it, rotates from there. See, with Z, X, and Y. See what we're doing. And I just want to take this back to the world origin. So I'm going to move the cursor to world origin and then selected to cursor. And then I'm going to pop back out of isolation. And I'm going to hide my cube and that working plane that we had. Tab back into edit mode, because what I want to do, take my knife, I just want to put a little edge here. And then I'm going to select this face. I'm going to select this edge again, move my cursor there, and I'm going to hit period, and I'm going to then set my pivot point to the 3D cursor, and I'm going to just rotate this. Oh, I have to select my face first. Rotate this Y, just because that's kind of how it looks when you're in the subway. That looks fine. And then I'm going to come over to a modifier. I'm going to give it some thickness. Yeah, that's about fine. And then I just want to check my object transform information, and I want its rotation to all be 0, and I want its scale to all be set to 1, because right now you can see it's set to 3. These are all different dimensions, but I want, we'll see if I test it all to 1, that's its true scale, but I want it to be about this size, but we're going to use imperial. So to change that unit set, you come over to this editor window for data and then properties. And in there, you'll see a tab for scene. And then under scene, you'll see units. We want to change from metric to imperial because I live in America. We use imperial for whatever reason. I'll make sure that I'm in just a scale that I think is appropriate for what I'm doing. In this case, feet. And I want to hit Control A, which will bring up my apply menu. And you'll see that if I hit apply all transformations, all of these values will then change to reflect what I've been working with. And I want to set this, make sure that we swap back to our active element, because then that'll work from the origin of the object. And I just want to scale this until it's about 20 feet there. That looks good. And then I'll hit Control A again, apply all, and that's starting to look like something. We can come back into our modifiers, fold that one up because we don't really need it right now, and we'll click Array. I like to work in constant, but and I don't want to go along the X. I want to go across the Y. I'll set it to 12. Going in, I mean, that's fine. I'll just pull it in a little more. It's like right there. That's fine by me. It doesn't need to be perfect. And then, yeah, I'll just make more. Make as many as we want. Come back into the editor, just because we want to give these some kind of depth. We don't really need to. Again, just how much time you want to put into it. For our first pass, I don't think this is too bad. Back over there, just so that it reacts to the light a bit better. And we'll cut this one out, because we'll pull this. And we'll just do an extrude there. And we'll do an extrude there. We'll just kind of play with it a little until we get where we need to go. Actually, I'll set my move across to normal so we can get a nice kind of there. And yeah, that's about it. I'm going to swap over to EV just so that it's a little easier to work with. And yeah, we've got something that resembles something. All right, that was it.